Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm reviewing a pen from Jinhao. Now Jinhao is a Chinese pen company that has made a lot of pens that resemble other pens, as well as sort of original kinds of designs. And one of the pens is the pen I'm looking at today. It's a Jinhao 85, which is heavily inspired by that all-time classic, the Parker 51. Now Jinhao, as well as a number of other companies, Hero, Wingsung, etc., have copied or taken heavy inspiration from the Parker 51 over the years. The Parker 51 was one of the most famous and well-loved pens, sort of all time, really. So much so that it was actually reimagined by Parker and released again this year. And that coincided, strangely enough, with the release of the Jinhao 85 as well. So I'm going to talk about the parts and features of this pen. I'm going to do a writing sample, talk about some pros and cons. Okay, so this, as I said, is the Jinhao 85. It's got a gold-coloured metal cap and then a brass lacquered body. And this is the blue version, which I think is a beautiful blue. It's got some lovely depth to it there. It features the traditional Parker-style arrow clip, as well as that sort of peaked dome top. The cap swells out a little bit. You've got a little centre band there that says Jinhao. And then the body of the pen continues along and tapers down to a nice sort of rounded dome on the end there. It is a screw cap pen and it unscrews in 2.5 turns. The pen does post, but not very well at all. It makes actually quite a long pen. You unscrew the barrel of the pen here to reveal a converter, and it is a standard-ish cartridge converter pen, standard international-ish. Not all, with Jinhao, one thing you have to be aware of is that sometimes your standard international cartridges or converter will not fit. They make their own that have slightly different dimension to the top, and that can sometimes mean that the pen will not accept some other standard international depending on how it opens up at the top there. You know, it has a typical Parker 51 style hooded nib. Is a steel nib. I have this in the, I can't really tell if it's an extra fine or a fine. I couldn't find that on the order that I placed to get this, but it writes sort of like about a fine, steel nib, and everything else is fairly sort of familiar from a lot of other pens and a lot of other brands. Let's do size comparisons now for the Jinhao 85. A couple of pens I want to show it alongside. Firstly, an original Parker 51. So you can see the similarities in the line and particularly in that clip. And then here is the reimagined Parker 51, the new model, which once again carries on some of those very similar lines from the original. And then, of course, a Lamy Safari there. So you can see it's actually a pretty decent length pen. It's a touch longer than the Parkers, and also a touch longer there than the Lamy Safari. Uncapped, you see it maintains that length. It is now just a touch shorter than the Lamy Safari, but I think it's a fairly good sized pen. As I said, still bigger than particularly the new model of the Parker 51. As I said, the pen posts, but it's not a pen that I think posts particularly securely. I think it's an okay length without being posted. But here in comparison, you see it's longer than the Lamy Safari when posted, definitely longer than the two Parkers. Actually, one of the things I used to love about the original Parker 51 is how well it posted, and even the new Parker 51 doesn't post as well. So what are the specifications here of the Jinhao 85? Well, it's 143 millimeters when it is capped. So good length. 127 when it is uncapped, which makes it a very usable length in the hand. And then it is 170 when it is posted. So as you can see, it's quite long. It doesn't affect the weight too much, even though a good portion of the weight is in the cap, but it's not the most secure posting, and I definitely think it's not necessarily a pen that you need to post. The section goes from roughly 8 to 10 millimeters, depending on where you hold it. Most people will hold it in that 9 to 10 millimeter range on the grip section there. And the weight of it is 26 grams, 16 in the body and 10 in the cap. That is when it is inked. So it's not a super light pen, but definitely, sort of light enough to not cause fatigue or anything like that. Let's do a writing sample. We have the Jinhao 85. As I said, this is like an extra fine-ish nib, steel hooded nib there. And the ink I'm using is Waterman. Serenity Blue, that good old stock standard ink that we know and love. Let's do some writing. So you would have heard the nib is pretty smooth. It's not even feedback, it's just like, it's not buttery smooth. There's a bit of just a slight little bit of drag perhaps on this nib, which isn't unpleasant. And actually it's a fairly nice pen to write with. I enjoy writing with this in, good size in my hand. And I think it's actually, a fairly, good writer. It's a very stiff nib. Like a lot of these sort of hooded nibs, it's not gonna give any sort of flex. Reverse writing is surprisingly good and actually kind of surprisingly wet. The wetness of the pen in general is actually pretty solid. For a very fine nib like this, I think it does quite a good job. This is a reliable pen. It writes well, and I find that for everyday writing, I think it's a pretty decent option. So what are pros and cons for the Jinhao 85? Well, I have two cons really, and that's about it. One of them is the fact that it uses so many design elements from Parker. So it's not an original design. Now the Parker 51 is has been around for decades and decades, and so many brands have taken the elements from it that it's almost like not unheard of anymore. Like it's a normal thing. Jinhao have done it on multiple versions themselves. The Jinhao, I think it might even be the Jinhao 51A or something like that. So similar. What I like about this particular version of it though is that it takes elements and actually uses them fairly well. The other con I have for this pen is that occasionally you get ink on the section here. You can actually, I don't know if the light will pick it up, but you can actually see like remnants of where the ink has dried there on the section. I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that with the semi-hooded nib, when you fill it, you're getting a lot of ink remaining sort of up and around that where the nib comes through there. But in terms of pros, I'm going to start with something that is really obvious here, and that is price. Jinhao make affordable pens. They are a Chinese brand that mass produces pens, sells them through, they're sold by multiple sellers on eBay and places like that, as well as in some retailers stocking certain Jinhao pens. This particular pen retails for US around $10 and slightly cheaper. So super good value. I like it. I think it's got a fairly reliable nib, and it's actually pretty smooth. It's good. I think the pen has a good length. It's a nice sort of size, and I like the feel of the material and the threads that to cap it. It's a well-made pen. The tolerances are pretty good. Jinhao kind of either get things very right or very wrong, and for me, this is one of those pens that gets a lot quite right. It's a reliable pen. It's a pen I will use again. Is it as good or better than the Parker 51? Well, I don't think a lot compares to the original Parker 51. Is it better or worse than the new one? Well, you can see what I think about that in a couple of weeks when I put my next video about these pens up. But I think in terms of this pen on its own, it works. It's affordable. has a converter that comes with the pen. It seems fairly durable, like it's metal, so I think there's a lot going for it. So I hope you found this video about the Jinhao 85 interesting and useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications button if you want to stay up to date with the videos that I produce. Please feel free to get in touch using any of the platforms listed below, or you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at @the_offstage_me. Or you can contact me on any of my videos here, or drop me an email which is listed down below. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, or if there's a way you'd like to support the channel by sponsoring a review or providing an item for review, I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, enjoy your pens, enjoy writing, and I'll talk to you soon.